I have no doubt in my mind that there's a higher dimension, a fourth or a fifth dimension. And that dimension, we can't access it. Because we would have to come off of the surface of our universe, our three-dimensional universe. It's like a three-dimensional fabric. We'd have to peel ourselves off of that in order to enter the realm of the higher dimensions. And we haven't figured out how to do that, except when we die. And I think that when we die, that's when that happens. When the consciousness, which we can't fathom because we can't touch it, you know. But, 200 years ago, we couldn't touch radio signals either. We didn't know about them. And if somebody was transmitting a radio signal, we would never know. It's not until somebody invented a radio receiver that we were able to say, oh, look, there's an energy going through. We can pick this up. We don't have the senses to do it, but we may just invented something that can now tell us, yeah, there's an energy there that we can't see. So it's totally possible and totally easy to believe that there are other energies out there that we just haven't got the equipment to detect yet. And one of those energies would be our consciousness. Our consciousness energy. And why do I think it's an energy? Because there's another concept coming up in a few minutes that I need to explain to you, and there's a video clip, that consciousness has an effect on reality. Our consciousness, and to a small degree, individually, our consciousness and our awareness has an effect on our lives. People always say, well, think positive, good things will happen. As a collective human race, our collective consciousness, if it's focused on one thing or the same type of thing, can greatly affect the fabric of space-time, the fabric of the universe. And there's proof of this. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Let me just briefly touch on the soul. The soul is the consciousness. I think it's the same thing. It enters our body from somewhere when we're born, and when we die, it leaves the body and goes back to that somewhere. Where is that somewhere? It's that upper dimension, that outside dimension that we can't reach. But when we die, we get peeled away and we go there. And I think that can pretty much explain a lot of things. Paranormal activity, ghosts, life after death, near-death experience, a lot of things can be explained by just simply being able to visualize this upper dimension, or maybe many of them. Okay? So, how does consciousness and awareness affect our universe, or our how did I explain it earlier? It affects reality. How does it affect matter? How does it affect reality? Well, you've heard people say, you've probably heard people say, we all create our own reality. Okay? So if I'm walking down the street and I'm thinking, I would like a car to pass me by right now, and I look over, oh yeah, there's a car. It's not like that. Because if the guy across the street is watching, he didn't create that reality, so he's going to see the car too. And if everyone is creating their reality, that literally, there'd be all kinds of crazy crap going on, believe me. But as a collective consciousness, and I believe that the consciousness that enters our bodies when we're born comes from a collective consciousness, or a grand consciousness that's in that other dimension, that it's right here with us, that dimension. Like our clothes next to our skin, but we just can't hop off the universe to get there. Okay? But I believe that the consciousness we all possess is part of a grand consciousness that exists, and all over the universe, life forms have the same, are possessed by the same consciousness. It's just a little part of the same grand consciousness that exists outside of our known space-time. This is not a new idea. I came up with a lot of this on my own, but then I've conferred with other people who believe the same thing, and it's becoming a very agreed upon concept outside of scientific study, because scientists, they don't rely, it's all about experiments. They need to have controlled experiments, and it all has to be done with, you know, if there's no proof, then you can't state it. There has to be evidence and proof and all this kind of stuff. And so if they can prove something to be true, then it becomes fact. But we're talking about stuff that we can't prove. We're talking about ideas that we have deep down in our soul that are speaking to us. Where do we come from? How does it all work? Well, let's get on to this video clip of this experiment that was done and is being done right now, of these little black boxes that they have. And these little black boxes are like little black boxes, like little electronic circuitry. And all it does is it creates random numbers, except when something huge happens in the world, like 9/11, O.J. Simpson, other events that have taken place. They have taken measurements with these random number generators and found that right around the exact time where these huge events happen, when all of our consciousness and all of our awareness is focused on this one thing, it changes reality somehow. And it changes the number generators that these little black boxes generate. I'm going to let you watch this clip and let this very smart dude explain this to you.
The Global Consciousness Project is an evolutionary step out of 50 years of prior experiments. So I think it was 1994, I did an experiment before, during, and after the announcement of the O.J. Simpson verdict in his murder trial. It was a reading of a verdict which would either say guilty or not guilty. And so imagine the amount of attention that's slowly focusing up to that moment. I figured this would make a great experiment, because I could have a whole bunch of random number generators going, and we can look in time sequence what is happening to the randomness as we approach the moment of announcement of the verdict, where we have maybe 1 billion people paying attention to it. So I did that. I had 5 random number generators going, 4 in the US and 1 in Europe, and tracked what was happening to the randomness as we got closer and closer to the verdict and the verdict being read and afterwards. And we found very clear evidence that there was a sudden peak in order in the random generators within seconds of the verdict being read. And of course it was being read live and carried around the world on radio and television all over the place. So it was a live event worldwide. So we decided to create a system that would be completely automatically running 24/7 with random number generators located in places around the world. So today, as of today, the project is going for 10 years. There's roughly 70 random generators in cities around the world, and it's been running for pretty much continuously for 10 years. So 9/11 was not predicted as far as most people knew. And we had 37 random number generators, maybe 36 or 37 running at that time. And we were then able to look and see what was happening to randomness before, during, and after 9/11. And we subsequently, a bunch of us did an analysis, and we published it in Foundations of Physics Letters, which is a physics journal. Because what we found was unmistakable evidence that the randomness in all 36 generators went away. Slightly before 9/11, at 9/11, a little bit after, and then it went back to baseline. So you have a baseline randomness statistically. You have 9/11 approaching about 2 or 3 hours before 9/11. The whole system, the whole random system became orderly. And then 9/11 occurred, and it went through all kinds of strange random or non-random effects, and then it balanced out after a while and went back to being orderly. So this is one of now over 200 such events. Things like gigantic tsunamis, earthquakes, political events, the death of celebrities, unexpected things. And when you look at composite over the 200-some events, the odds against chance are over 1,000,000 to 1 now. So we have good statistical reasons to believe that the random generators are not behaving randomly when there are large-scale events that attract a lot of attention. At this point, we don't know then which direction the arrow of causation goes. We don't know whether it's simply a lot of human minds that are somehow changing randomness, or whether this is a reflection of something bigger. something like a collective mind.
We're afraid of the economy. We're afraid of 2012. We're afraid of government. We're afraid of all these things that everyone's talking about. We're afraid of all this stuff. We're afraid of terrorism. We're afraid of, our kids being taken. All this stuff we're afraid. We fear. And as a human race, we live in fear all the time. If we could just all break out of that fear and collectively release it and think positive, we can change our reality. And some of you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to get into details. Some of you know what I mean and what we need to change. What can you say? It's being done, and the studies are conclusive that when we collectively focus on something, there is a change in space, in the ether, in the fabric, in the consciousness, the whatever it is. These little computers react to it. And this is no joke, folks. This is real stuff. So don't even. Now, the final thing I want to bring to you is a third clip. It's called the double slit experiment. And again, this is an annoying cartoonish kind of video. This guy with this crazy mustache, whatever, his eyes are boggling out. But this is an actual experiment that was done, and it's called the double, I don't know how else to explain it. It proves to you that the act of observation, the act of awareness changes reality. And there's no other way I can explain it. I'm going to bring you the clip right now.
And here we are, the granddaddy of all quantum weirdness, the infamous double slit experiment. To understand this experiment, we first need to see how particles, or little balls of matter, act. If we randomly shoot a small object, say a marble, at the screen, we see a pattern on the back wall where they went through the slit and hit. Now, if we add a second slit, we would expect to see a second band duplicated to the right. Now, let's look at waves. The waves hit the slit and radiate out, striking the back wall with the most intensity directly in line with the slit. The line of brightness on the back screen shows that intensity. This is similar to the line the marbles make. But when we add the second slit, something different happens. If the top of one wave meets the bottom of another wave, they cancel each other out. So now there is an interference pattern on the back wall. Places where the two tops meet are the highest intensity, the bright lines, and where they cancel, there is nothing. So, when we throw things, that is, matter, through two slits, we get this, two bands of hits. And with waves, we get an interference pattern of many bands. Good so far. Now, let's go quantum. An electron is a tiny, tiny bit of matter, like a tiny marble. Let's fire a stream through one slit. It behaves just like the marble, a single band. So, if we shoot these tiny bits through two slits, we should get, like the marbles, two bands. What? An interference pattern! We fired electrons, tiny bits of matter through. But we get a pattern like waves, not like little marbles. How? How could pieces of matter create an interference pattern like a wave? It doesn't make sense. But physicists are clever. They thought, maybe those little balls are bouncing off each other and creating that pattern. So, they decide to shoot electrons through one at a time. There is no way they could interfere with each other. But after an hour of this, the same interference pattern is seen to emerge. The conclusion is inescapable. The single electron leaves as a particle, becomes a wave of potentials, goes through both slits, and interferes with itself to hit the wall like a particle. But physicists were completely baffled by this, so they decided to peek and see which slit it actually goes through. They put a measuring device by one slit to see which one it went through and let it fly. But the quantum world is far more mysterious than they could have imagined. When they observed, the electron went back to behaving like a little marble. It produced a pattern of two bands, not an interference pattern of many. The very act of measuring or observing which slit it went through meant it only went through one, not both. The electron decided to act differently, as though it was aware it was being watched. And it was here that physicists stepped forever into the strange, never-world of quantum events. What is matter? Marbles or waves? And waves of what? And what does an observer have to do with any of this? The observer collapsed the wave function simply by observing.
Okay, so how does this all connect together? Let's summarize. Consciousness, a soul, okay, a higher dimension. So somewhere for that soul to go when it's finished, when we're done, when our bodies die. Somewhere for that soul to come from next time somebody is born. A purpose for the universe. What purpose? A universe that was created so that a consciousness could experience a reality through our body senses. We're like a vehicle, kind of like a roller coaster car. We get in the car, we go for a ride, and when the car stops, we get out and we go back to our normal lives. Highly believe that that's exactly what's happening here, guys. Consciousness enters our body, goes for the ride, and believe me, at times it's a wild one. And then when it stops, it gets off, goes back. Maybe it'll take another ride. Maybe not. But the point of the matter is that the universe is here because of consciousness. It's here because consciousness exists and it needs a way to have an experience. What does the universe do? What is the one most common thing that happens in the universe all the time? It improves upon itself. At first we only had hydrogen. Now we've got all these atoms around and it creates all this material that we have. Improves itself. Stars explode. They now, they create the material to make planets, new materials. And then life starts existing. Life gets more complicated. All of a sudden, life can now house consciousness. Consciousness can now live this existence and leave that existence with, knowledge, an experience. It takes the experience it has with it when it goes back. You get on a roller coaster, you ride, you go all around the track, you get off that roller coaster, now you've got that experience. You retain that experience for the rest of your life. There's a purpose for this universe. And if we can all stop being so bloody afraid of everything, stop fearing the news, don't watch the news. Stop fearing the economy, stop fearing things. Stop being afraid. You know what? Because when everybody's afraid, we're going to create a reality of fear. Stop being afraid. Start thinking positive. Don't growl and grumble and think negative things. That guy, you can't do this, you can't do that. No, think positive. Stop being afraid of things. Stop being afraid of everything you hear on the news and, oh, the swine flu and stuff. No. If everybody could just stop fearing, then the means of control over the human race will go away. And we will be free of fear and free of negative things, negativity. I know this sounds philosophical. The point of the matter is that we all need to stop being afraid. We all need to believe that we have the power to create a better reality. But we can't do it individually. We have to do it as a group. We have to do it as a team, the whole world as a team, or most of us. And I know that this is starting to come out. I know this is starting to happen. There's a new age movement out there of people, starting to realize that we do change reality with our thoughts, with our consciousness. And if we can just think nice things and be positive and stop being afraid, our world can be better. We can create a beautiful reality. Oh, God. I sound like Mr. Rogers. These are just my thoughts. It's brain farts, But I think about these kinds of things all the time. And I'm very interested to hear what you think. So please comment. Please rate this video with a thumbs up. And if you're interested in what I do, subscribe. That's all. That's all I ask. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching. Cheers, guys.